Running Sentences presents The Lost Adventures of a Maybe Hero. Part 6. Greetings! Leonardo finds himself in a new home, one that he wants to escape from rather quickly. This is a work of fiction, and he names characters, businesses, events, and incidences within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real events, real incidences, real situations, and or fictional situations, characters, businesses, and or events is completely coincidental. Copyright 2022, Michael Honnery. All rights reserved. Leonardo hurried into the garage looking for his butler Jeeves, but once again the man had pulled a vanishing act. Or worse, something had happened to him. This was his current theory, since there were more men in finely tailored suits, and even a few women who were also in suits in here. He wondered if he had been noticed yet, as he slid towards the side, hoping to use the wall as cover, since there was nothing else going on here aside from the group of 12 odd people milling about in the center of the garage space. He didn't think his plan was going to work, but he had to do something, and maybe Catalina was upstairs in that space above the garage. His mind said that there wasn't much hope, but he hoped, and so he kept creeping along the wall, watching the group. He managed to make it about 10 feet before he was noticed. "Hey, who are you?" "Me?" "Yeah, you." The group shifted and turned so that they could see Leonardo sort of grasping at the wall, spread out with his arms and legs. Hey, it's our man, the one we've been looking out for, 'cause he's up to something." "Me?" The group had begun to approach Leonardo, and forming a semicircle around him so that he could not escape. It was not a good sign, as he realized that he was still slightly in costume on, at least partially on, and his chest was bare, and he also revealed a bit of his pudge sitting on his stomach. He felt naked, worried, and unsure of himself. What was going on here? "Well, if he's the one we want, Hugo, then why don't we grab him already?" "We handle things with care, Bethany. You know that. No scratches on the merchandise. That's the way the boss wants it, and that's the way it gets delivered." "And if said merchandise starts to kick and fight?" "We talk the man down, and don't disrespect the person in front of you by referring to it as an it. That's just gross." Excuse me, but are you with the mob?" The group ignored his sudden attempts to get at information and delay their tightening semicircle around him. The two who had been speaking, a man and a woman, were at the top of this semicircle and were throwing occasional glances his way, unconcerned by how things were going and the tightening circle. "Who are you people?" Two had closed in on his side and managed to grab a hold of his arms before he could act any further. Now, Mr. Leonardo, you're here to be set free. Wouldn't you like to be free?" Leonardo shook his head furiously no, as another of this group approached and produced a syringe of some sort. He worried first that someone was randomly carrying around a syringe on them and that it had been hidden away. That was not a good thing. There wasn't any time to do anything about that, since all he could do was kick at this approaching person. But this got his foot stepped on by a person next to him, so that he could not do that. The needle then found his arm, and things began to look like there were many, many copies of all the people around him. It made his stomach lurch, but things began to fade from view before anything worse came about. His head pounding and feeling like mush, Leonardo woke up and blinked a few times. It was dark wherever he was, and whatever he was lying on was soft and slightly comfortable. Not that that helped his current headache. He blinked a few more times before trying to move. He found that was simple and easy enough to do, though his arm was complaining of a dull pain shooting through it from the spot that he suspected he'd been injected from. Probably. And upon sitting up, he looked about the dark space and could see a window casting a bit of light into this room. But it was dark as well outside, so there was not much light to be had. And what it did show him, however, was that there was a door across from this tiny window, and so he got up to try that door handle. He turned it this way and that, to no result. The door would not budge, which was disappointing since he didn't want to be in here anymore. He looked about further and saw that there was another door on his left, so he went over towards that one, expecting the same thing to happen, and yet this one opened easily. One small bit of success was a good thing, yet what it would lead to made him rather nervous. He wondered if he was still wearing his hero costume since he couldn't really tell, but the clothes did feel different, but he didn't really care, he decided. It just didn't matter as he went through the door. He stepped into an office and stopped to blink at the bright lights that lit up. "Oh, you're awake, good sir. Welcome, welcome to my humble home." Leonardo blinked again. He adjusted to the sight of a home office replete with the usual stuff. Desk, computer, bookshelves, and the accoutrements one might have for an office at home. It looked very normal and nice, which was odd. He hadn't been treated normally in getting him here. Leonardo opened his mouth to speak, but found it dry and not willing to make any noise. The man behind the desk noted this and turned over a glass that was part of a jug set that sat on the desk, and began pouring water from the jug into the glass. Then offered it to him. "Please take this. It should do away with the dryness you're facing. By the way, I'm sorry about Hugo and Bethany and the way they treated you in such a way. I was trying to be friendly with the way I brought you in here, but it looks like it didn't quite work out. I am sorry." The glass firmly in hand, Leonardo drank from it thirstily, downing it as fast as he could. It took a few more seconds for him to empty it, and then to be able to sigh into relief. His mind, though, now kicked into gear, as he had to figure out who this person was, and why he wanted him here of all places. Excuse me, if this sounds rude, but what the fuck was that kidnapping me about? Well, are you part of the mob or something? Because if you're the mob, it isn't going to end well, I think, since my parents... "I am not the mob, and I have been in contact with someone claiming to be your parents very recently, sir." "Oh, and what proof do you have of these claims?" The man rose from behind the desk with a friendly smile and came around holding his arms out in an unthreatening manner. Leonardo wondered if this person wasn't up to something or what was going on with them. "I am Daniel, owner of the home for the house that have wandered from the path. There are a few of us here." Good for you. I haven't wandered from any path, and that's not any proof of any claims or anything like that." "Unfortunately for you, your master, Jeeves, your parent of some sort, seems to think otherwise. And until the all clear has been given, I cannot let you just go back." Leonardo decided he did not like this man one bit, and took as many steps backwards as he could. The wall came up abruptly behind him and put a stop to this effort. "You have nothing to fear from me, Leonardo, or should I say the masked butler, We here keep heroic heroes safe and away from the clutches of criminals. It will do you a world of good to be here. You will train, I say." Daniel did not get any closer towards Leonardo, but he did head towards the door that Leonardo had come in through, and opened it. "Please follow me, sir. You can stay here if you wish, but there is no escape from this house. The windows are all barred shut, and there are other obstacles in the way as well, but we won't get into that." The strange man had exited, as Leonardo took a careful look at the window behind the desk. The one that was here did have a distinct metal look behind it, and also did not appear to have any way to open it. Escape would definitely have to come from some other way. There would be no staying here, he figured, and he took in a breath to calm himself, even as he felt goosebumps and a shiver run up and down him. This place, where people wandered from the path, sounded like a cult, and he didn't like that. As Leonardo took a step to follow, surprised by himself, he found the room, this home office, plunged into darkness, and so he hurried after Daniel. Upon entering the room that he had exited just a couple of minutes ago, and had been dark, he now found was brazenly lit up to reveal several lounge chairs and a bar and an area, and figured one of the chairs might have been where he was sleeping. Leonardo looked at Daniel, who had gone over to the bar and was fixing himself a drink, and looked surprised that Leonardo was already there. "Oh, I figured you'd be rattling away at the window for a few more minutes. Well, this is either a good sign or a bad one. I suppose we shall have to find out about that, won't we? How is this room lit? When I was here, the lights. We all have our secrets and abilities, Mr. Leonardo. So for now, let's just say I have a steady current running through me." The man moved with his drink towards another door, opening it and going through it. The second he left, the room plunged back into darkness. Leonardo blinked, putting two thoughts together in his mind, and figured out what this man had meant as he moved after him. To his surprise, Daniel had begun waltzing his way down a hallway as he took swigs of his drink. It was quite the sight, since the lights flickered when both feet were a few inches off of the ground, yet somehow stayed on. Come, Mr. Leonardo, we have much to explore in this maze of a house." "You could show me the front door." "Yes, I suppose I could, but no, I cannot." Leonardo had kept his pace slow, staying away from this dancing man. He had the feeling the man was either drunk, or perhaps easily tipsy, or just having fun. "Why not? Why will you not show me this door?" "Well, it's difficult to explain. It isn't really a front door, and I've been stuck here, and my friends have been stuck here for as long as I can remember. Can't get out. They say it is for our own safety, but what do they know, the bastards?" To Leonardo, it felt like his heart had just come to a sudden stop and was not going to go anymore. A second later, it felt like it resumed its normal activities, but still, he looked about the narrow hallway with a panic shooting through him. There had to be a way out of here, otherwise, he didn't like the thought. How had he gotten put in here if there was no way in here in the first place, too? "I've told you a little lie, by the way. There is a way out, but we can't get to it." Daniel was already at the end of the hallway and through another doorway at the end of it. This plunged the room into darkness and left Leonardo groping his way along, hoping not to run into anything that came up, though he was pretty sure he hadn't seen anything sitting on the sides of the hallway, so it was probably safe, but still, better safe than sorry and run into anything. When he safely reached the end of the hallway, Leonardo came into a living room area. Though it was rather cramped and small one, the couch was jammed against the far wall with a TV a few feet from it, along with another wall. There was plenty of floor-to-ceiling windows that didn't look like they opened and had steel bars across them, and also a grey darkness beyond them. Daniel had crowded towards the center of the room where the TV was and pointed upwards while looking in that direction. "As you can see, there is a hole in our ceiling. It's opened right now, allowing them to drop down anything and anyone down onto our TV, should they so wish. Though, from the looks of it, I think I see clouds overhead. Seems like it might rain, so they will probably close it soon." Leonardo hurried over to see what this madman was talking about, and sure enough, just over the TV and stretching up and up, perhaps up to a third story on this place, was a hole. It was now closing, but it was a hole in the ceiling, and he could see just the vaguest of grey, shadowy clouds somewhere before it was shut off. Daniel had sat down on the couch because there was little room, and because there was little room, had pulled up his legs to cuddle with them so that he could sit comfortably. I thought you were going to show me about the place." "I will, but I remembered that it is just about time for the late news to come on. They might have some news about that recent bank robbery. I think it happened a few towns over, or maybe it was close, or maybe it was far away. I don't know." Leonardo felt a bit of elation run through him. Had that robbery been the one that he had stopped, or was it a different one? It would be a pity if it was something different. He'd like to know how things had turned out with his stopping of the robbery, and if he had really managed to stop some terrible misdeed. His body moved of its own accord around the cable line that went to the back of the TV and then over towards the couch itself. He sat down and then pulled up his own legs to give himself a little room to sit here. Daniel turned the television on and settled down once again as the screen showed a male newscaster staring at the camera. Good evening. Today's late night news delivered to you before you go to sleep, so that you can worry about everything bad happening in your dreams as well. Tonight's top story, a bank robbery in a little town of Bartsport, actually has some good news that came out because of the robbery. What good news? Do tell, newscaster, do tell. I'm Henry, and that is coming up shortly after this short commercial break. The TV began to blare some commercial with a zippy little song going along with it, but Leonardo wasn't interested in this, so he tuned it out. He looked to Daniel on the other side, who seemed quite taken to it, bouncing from side to side along with the music. For the first time, he really looked at the man who was wearing a sort of business casual affair that seemed to bulge and not necessarily fit as well as it normally should. It was sort of spandexy, if he had to give a word to it. However, the song and the commercials were thankfully over in a second, and the newscaster was back. This evening's top story, a bank robbery with a good ending. In a shocking twist, the big bank in the town of Bartsport was robbed, but it turned out the robbers, who were stopped by a weird superhero or a man claiming to be the masked butler, were actually doing good. You see, these robbers had actually found that these bank officials had been siphoning off money from charity accounts within the bank. They would take that money and deposit them into their own accounts. Several big bank people, including the big CEO, were arrested, and that includes many hotshot gung-ho lower investment bankers who worked there. That's all for tonight's action reporting, since it's expensive to cover what's happening in the rest of the world. Good night. The TV flickered off, with Daniel pumping his fists in the air. That was exciting. I wish I could get out there once again and save the day like the masked butler did. Leonardo was only partially hearing the man next to him, as he was still trying to take in and make something of the report that had been told to him. He'd broken up a good thing in a robbery, but wouldn't that make him the bad guy? He couldn't take it in, and had to get off the couch as questions poured into his mind about what this made him, good or bad. It was only the fact that Daniel was shaking him that took him out of this, and he looked over to the man whose eyes were now glowing. You're the masked butler, right? That's what Jeeves said, something about that. That's what Jeeves told me. You have superpowers, right? You can fly us out of here, right? Heroes always have a power of flight, because otherwise they aren't much good as supers. At some point, Daniel had grabbed a hold of Leonardo's shirt and began shaking that and pulling him back and forth. Even if I was the masked butler, guy person, I don't have superpowers. Then why are you here, The only people down here have strange, magical, mystical powers to them, but we can't fly. Wouldn't that make you bad heroes? You just said that you would... What? How do you have no powers to escape? What are the walls made of here that won't let you escape? Oh, they're made of obsidian. That was certainly an answer, and well, he wasn't actually expecting an answer to it, and so Leonardo took a moment to register this as well in his mind, and even though there was a lot going on and being thrown out of it, and then snapped to again. Wait, are we underground? What's with the windows if we're underground? Yep, we are under the ground. It's partly why we can't escape. I suppose now that I think about it, they probably built this special prison so that only certain heroes couldn't escape. So I guess they wouldn't throw down a person here that they thought could get out. But you never know. They said Alcatraz was inescapable, and someone might have accomplished that, or been wiped out into the Pacific Ocean if the currents got to them. Daniel seemed distracted and all over the place, and still hadn't removed his grip in shaking Leonardo's shirt, but then let go, looking wild-eyed. Would you like to see the outside? It will show you that how we are here and how we can't escape, and all the obsidian walls that you want. Plus, there's probably a few other of our heroic prisoners out there catching some light from the UV ray light things that keep us warm. Daniel was already headed towards the door, but this time Leonardo was the one to grab hold of him to stop the escape. There's an outdoor section here, and how is it an outdoor section if we're underground? And why are there bars on the windows if we're underground? Why is any of this going on? I don't know. I'm not the master of the prison. Why ask me? I simply live here. Do you think that whoever operates this place tells me things? Well, yes, I do. You said you were the owner of the place, and that Hugo and Bethany were sent by you to get me. What is going on? Daniel had backed away from him, looking at him like he was a madman who'd gotten loose. Leonardo was starting to question that himself, since he couldn't really remember much from his childhood, or anything, really, aside from the past few weeks. It was all sort of blank, where his mind should have had memories of childhood and a slightly adulthood. It hadn't been that long ago since he was a kid, had it? In this moment of thinking, Daniel had fled out of the door, and it took a second for Leonardo to realize this, but decided he didn't want to pursue the man. No. He would explore all on his own, now free of crazy. He'd gone out into a hallway in search of some place to capture his attention. This effort had led Leonardo right into the hallway entrance that had both a stairs upward and a front door. Oh, come on. You can't put that there and not expect anyone to try it. Even though he was talking to himself, Leonardo had to simply say it, and he walked with a quick step up to the front door and twisted the door handle, popping it open. In front of him sat a black obsidian wall, which didn't look very welcoming, so he closed the door without comment and turned towards the stairs. Now there, he hoped, would be an option to explore. Up the staircase he went, 2 by 2, staring at the black bleakness ahead of him, which worried him. It looked similar to the stone he'd seen out of the front door, and it took only a few seconds to confirm that as he'd run into the end of the staircase, one that ended in obsidian and a black wall, unless there was a secret passageway up here. He groped the wall and all around. Nothing happened, and he found himself turning right back around and heading down again. His wanderings after that took him all over the place, but there was nowhere interesting, as this place was filled with lots of empty rooms. There was a few gym-like areas that caught his attention, but he wasn't really into working out, so he ignored those. Leonardo had walked through one last doorway, ready to give up on finding anything or anyone, when he found himself in a kitchen. A nice spot, but also terribly small. It felt like everything was crowded together in here, from the refrigerator to the stove, all in a small space that couldn't have been any bigger than 7 by 7 feet, maybe. But he never really guessed at space rooms, so he wasn't sure. But it could be. This room allowed for a way in and a way out, which was a glass door that went out towards a lawn where bright lights blazed away with a few figures that he could make out there, although he wasn't really sure. Leonardo decided to watch to see what would happen to those figures. Alas, nothing did, and to break the monotony of standing around, he went over to open the door and charge out. The harsh sun lamp lights glared down from above at the gaggle of people. Leonardo shielded his eyes to take it all in, but it was a hard sight to adjust to. "Ah, you finally joined us, Mr. Leonardo, or the masked butler, or whatever you're going to call yourself these days. These are the humble people who call this place home." 4 people got up from their chairs, which they'd been sunning themselves on. 2 women and 2 men looked at him curiously as he tried to look back. He couldn't really, with the glare from the lights still playing with his vision. "This, by the way, is Tom, and that is Cordy, and that is Natalie, and this is Francine." Leonardo offered a weak wave hello, as he still was using his other hand to guard himself against the bright lights. He wasn't sure what else he could do, and the reception hadn't been the most pleasant ones so far. Daniel seemed to also have a bit of an edge on his voice, which made it feel like something might happen soon. "Oh, okay, well, it's nice to meet you. You all have superpowers, I take it?" From what he could see, there were 5 heads, nodding yes, and now he really began to worry. He was in a prison with people who had abilities to do odd things, and he could not fight back. There was nothing he could do but take a few steps backwards. "Where are you going, Mr. Daniel? We do need to talk." Leonardo glanced towards Daniel, who'd said this. "Well, are we talking about how you claimed to be the owner of this place and that you sent people after me, only to claim then that it is a prison where you're stuck down here? Because if it is, and you're willing to talk about that, well, great. Otherwise, 5 people with odd powers against one who doesn't have a single power, well, that just sounds bad to me." "You think we're going to beat you up, don't you?" "How very mean. I've never beat up anyone in my life. Well, I did beat up that one person." "That's because you don't have the strength to do it, Gordy. The rest of us do, but you can only move things with the power of your mind." "Would you like me to move your fist to your face, Natalie?" "Oh boy, here we go again. Daniel, you really need to stop telling lies. Gordy and Natalie, please go find a room and get together and call it a day." "And Francine, well, that's a nice question to start off with, I suppose. Do you really think we're here to beat you up, Mr. What did you been called? Masked Butler? Leonardo? Whatever?" Tom strolled forward up to Leonardo as he was saying this and offered his hand to shake. Leonardo looked at the man levelly, wondering how badly this was going to turn out for him. His hand tentatively reached out and grasped at this hero's hand. It was a thing he instantly regretted as he felt himself being lifted into the air and then tossed as if nothing more than a loose bag of something across the grounds of this small lawn. He met the cavern wall a second later, which rudely rejected him and sent him back down towards the fake plastic lawn below. "Oh, it feels good to use my abilities again." The ground was not soft, and the air went out of Leonardo's lungs as he met that next. The feeling that there was rock below this artificial turf came to his mind, but instead of thinking about this, he decided now would be a good time to just shut his eyes for a little while. With a horrendous cough and feeling like half of his body was complaining that it hurt, Leonardo woke up some time later, the coughing fit overtaking and racking him up and down until all he could do was grab a nearby glass of water from somewhere, maybe a nightstand that was next to him, or slightly above him, he couldn't really tell, as he reached up towards it. The water soon greeting him as he quenched it down, and it calmed him a little bit. It took a few more seconds for him to register that he was no longer lying on the plastic matting, made to feel like grass, but in bed, or though the comfort level of it felt about a notch, maybe above plastic turf. Leonardo lay on this bed, letting himself wake up and finding out which part of him was going to complain when he moved it. It was mostly his right side, which made sense, since he'd smacked into the wall on that side. This process did not take long, and he soon was sitting up, wincing in pain, but not wanting to stick around on this bed that wasn't doing anything for him. "Hello, anyone there?" There was no answer, and he slowly got up, trying to figure out whether he was really low bed, maybe a futon of some sort, because he was right next to the ground, and it was squishy. But still, he got up and began wandering about what he figured was a bedroom. It was completely dark, and he was groping about, feeling for a doorway, or anything, really. His walk kept going until he felt something soft in front of him. He did not feel it for very long, and began backing up a few steps, turning in another direction, and began going that way, groping that direction, although slightly less extended out. The fear in his mind was that he'd just groped a person, one with super heroic abilities, and, well, doing that might end with him being thrown around again and losing consciousness. The dreaded feeling that life really wasn't going very well for him now, panicking through his mind. "Is that you, Leonardo?" The voice, who was pretty sure was Daniel's, stopped him. "But it was dark in here. Shouldn't there be lights?" "Daniel, he made lights, right?" Leonardo, is that you or is it not you? Did you wake up?" It is me, but what's going on?" Well, it seems you are somewhat important, and that those that control this place didn't like us just tossing you around. So we got smacked, and the machine was turned on. A machine? It is a thing that hums and haws, and it affects our heroic bodies, so we can't use or control our powers as much anymore. Oh, okay. Sorry if I groped you a second ago, or sorry to anyone who accidentally groped a few seconds ago. But would you please kindly explain, Daniel, why you claimed that you ran this place and sent people out to me? Also, why you have suddenly begun to act like you have no control over any of this, or what's going on? Please, pretty please? He peered into the darkness and realized that he was not in the bedroom he thought, but still outside in the fake lawn, with the plastic grass turf. Not that he could really see much from what he could make out, but the only other thing he could really see was the sort of shape of what he figured Daniel was in the basic direction of where the sound of his voice was coming from, and so he sort of assigned that area to Daniel. I could tell you that, Leonardo, but it is kind of a rather sad story. Okay, but how does that stop you from telling me? It doesn't, but, I needed to throw a fair warning up there, in case you are against sad stories. You never know with some people. They just can't handle sadness at all, and they shut you out the second things get to be a bit too much. Please stop with the excuses. I just want to know what's going on. Okay, it all started about 30 years ago, although it might be longer, might be shorter. Can't tell. Anyway, I was but a lad who had just discovered my powers, and I went about trying to save the day and help people. To that end, I was discovered by the government, who promised to help me set up a group of people, all who have superpowers as well. And once that group was set up, we all went off to save the day. So I gathered the people that you have met here, and we did exactly that. We saved the day time and time again, but we never got any press or any news about ourselves. All of our stuff was kept hush-hush. There were a few lights that flickered dimly on and revealed that the heroes were all surrounding Leonardo. He looked about, because most of their arms were crossed, and one of the women, we couldn't tell exactly who it was, either Natalie or Francine, looked displeased and had her arms completely across her chest, instead of just hanging below. He cringed, thinking that he'd grabbed her chest, but then questioned that, since it definitely felt muscly under the softness he'd grabbed, and if the internet was true to its word, breasts were made of fat unless one worked out really, really hard. But that also but wouldn't a superhero? Then breasts might be very hard in that case if they worked out really hard. But superheroes worked out really hard, didn't they? So might they? He let the thought in his mind trail off, and then looked towards Daniels, who was still semi-hidden in the darkness, to concentrate once again on the story being told, since that other, I thought, was really leading down paths he did not want to go to. For 5 years we worked in silence, saving the world, and then a mission went horribly wrong. You screwed it up, Daniel. I did not, Tom. We all made mistakes on that job, and it got the wrong person captured, and then because of that, you and Gordy lashed out at the government, who decided it was best to sideline us for a while. The government wasn't terribly angry with us at the time, but they decided we might be better use elsewhere, so they allowed us to form a school to help others with powers. It's all that they would allow us to do after that debacle, really. The woman, holding her hands across her chest, had stepped forward as she had said this. She wasn't glaring at him, but did seem to have some mistrust in her eyes. They explicitly seemed wary of him or anything he might do. To this, Leonardo decided to put his hands behind his back. Well, yes, we established a school to help, and we had many people come to us. Among them would be Hugo and Bethany, who you've met recently, and they were eventually contracted out by the government, and, well, they kept in touch with us. But things kept going wrong, and the powers that be that controlled us were unhappy with the results of our groups that we made. Before we knew what was going on, us original heroes were thrown down here. Yeah, but why? Why would you be thrown down here? We have no idea. We can't get any answers, and our friends have said that they've tried anything and everything and to get some answers, but we get nothing. The other lady, whose name he could not remember, was now walking around, pacing in the background as a shadowy figure dancing between the dim lights. He wondered if they were all going to contribute something to this story, and if that's why he was here, to get the story and get out. He, however, wasn't a reporter, so that couldn't be it, and it seemed like everybody would know this story already. But why was he down here? Then Hugo and Bethany, how do they come to talk to you? Oh, sometimes the phone is lowered through the hole, sometimes we find a phone next to us. It's all very weird. They can't come down here? Oh, no, they don't want to get trapped in here, I don't think. Leonardo now had this sorted somewhat in his mind, and he could somewhat accept it. Kind of accept it. The whole thing was a touch ridiculous and over the top, but so was the idea of superheroes and how the government might interact with them. Neither would like each other very much, with restrictions thrown out so that power was to stay with the people who craved it the most. If his comic books were anything to go by. Now, there was only one big problem left, and it didn't feel good to think about. So, did the government Jeeves get me brought down here? Or you, Daniel, get me brought down here, and why was I brought down here? I have been in touch with Jeeves, sir, and Mr. Masked Butler, and he did tell me about you, and yes, he was sort of responsible, but it wasn't me who brought you down here. No. Daniel would not do that to you. I don't know if it was Jeeves or the government who'd made the call and the decision, but I suspect the reason you are down here is actually for training. There was now a lot of words flying around in Leonardo's mind as he tried to decipher things further. This group founded a hero school and got it taken away and thrown in jail. And now they had a jail which they sort of run and were to train him to be a better hero. It felt like there was a lot going on behind all of this, and he didn't have the mind to take it in right now. Okay, I kinda understand where this is going. That said, I'm tired, exhausted, and maybe from the heavy blow, or maybe just from everything being thrown at me word-wise, but I need some sleep and/or food. If any of you would direct me in a direction where I could get those things. Oh, sorry about throwing you. It's our way of testing new heroes. Leonardo made a mental note of the man behind Daniel, who didn't look all that big, but had tossed him. Tom, right? He was pretty sure that was the name. He would figure it out later. Leonardo stared over at Daniel, but it was Natalie who came forward and began walking towards the house door. He half-turned, watching her move through the dim, soft light that made her mostly vanish. Without much thought, he found himself taking a few steps to follow her. I will show you to an open room and give you a chance to properly apologize for what you have done. They went back inside to the kitchen, where this lady came to a stop and looked over at him. Oh, I'm sorry I grabbed you. I didn't think I grabbed anything inappropriate, but sorry, nonetheless, that I grabbed you in the dark. Just so I'm totally sure what I grabbed. What did I grab? My legs. He nodded as he heard this. It sounded right, yet it didn't process until a second later that he'd grabbed legs. How had he grabbed legs? She was smaller than him by an inch. What? She had crouched down next to the floor and pushed aside a rug in this kitchen to reveal a hatchway that led downward. With a mighty heave, she pulled it open. I cannot control my powers when I get scared. I also generally don't like it when it gets too dark out. One of my abilities is to grow larger than the usual human. It is, however, before you ask, not big enough to try and get us out of here. We have tried that. She then pointed towards the slightly lit hole in the ground that had a ladder in it. Bedrooms are down here. We're rarely up here except for some sun, occasionally some food, and, of course, training. So, do your captors just dump food down the hole in your living room up there and, that's how you get fed? It doesn't make sense, especially for the government service that has deemed you unusable. I don't know. I was never high up on the information chain like Tom, Francine, or Daniel was, so I can't tell you. Maybe they figure they don't want to delete something that might be savable. You'd have to ask the others. She crouched down and slid into the hatchway entrance until she was firmly on the ladder, and then slid down that. The way down seemed to be taking Leonardo some time, because he kept looking down when he would get the chance to. Mostly to see where the next rung was, and also, since he didn't want to step on this lady's hand, she had slowed down a little bit so that she wasn't too far ahead of him. He wondered if he should ask a question to get more clarity, or if any answer would just bounce off of his mind. There had been a lot told to him lately, and he was still curious. But he was tired, and while he didn't feel like it was weighing him down, it was there weighing him down. His mind kept spurring this thought onward to try and figure it out, to strange places and off to odd ideas, when his foot hit not a rung, but something else. In a panic, he looked down to see a tiled floor under his foot. He looked this way and that, in a lit hallway of rooms, with the black and white interchanging tiles and doors that made it very confusing to look at, and a bit like a weird room from a funhouse, made to distort one's vision and not see things straight. He blinked a few times, trying to get his mind over and around all of it, and to see where this woman was, since she would be somewhat normal and could help him see. Welcome to where our rooms lie hidden. We haven't explored much down here despite how long we've been here. The first 5 doors you see are our rooms. Daniel, Tom, and Gordy all have rooms on the right side. They have put numbers on the doors to know which is which. Daniel is 1, and so on. Me and Francine are on the left. He nodded, thankful for a small hint as to who this woman was. She was probably Natalie, but he didn't ask if he was right in this assumption since he didn't want to piss her off. The last thing he needed was a mad person with superpowers coming after him. She pointed towards the 3rd door on the left. You'll be on the left side, 3rd door, okay? Sure, fine. Does it have a bed? No idea. She moved towards it with a few stuttered steps before looking back at him. He was still holding onto the ladder and felt lost. Yet he was tired and there might be a bed at the end of this. But it might also be a trap. No one had proven themselves to be trustworthy yet, and all he'd gotten were a lot of yarns and stories with no evidence of anything. Is something wrong? No, I was thinking to myself about stuff. You don't trust us then, do you? I'll say this as a warning. We've had one other person, similar to you, dropped in here with us. They didn't last but a few days before going mad. It wasn't us that caused the madness, but we did do our best to keep the person sane. If you don't want to be lost, follow what we say. Okay. That's crazy, but one question before I do go into that room. She sighed and rolled her eyes, turning fully to him. I just want to know how long you've been down here. He said this, holding up his hands just in case it was offensive. We have lost count of the years, but our best guess would be 2 decades or so. 2 decades? He'd come now further away from the ladder and towards the door, his jaw somewhat unhinged, as he had one more thing to add to his long list of things to know. Not that it would do him a lick of good, as escape was the only thing he should be concentrating on. He walked over towards this door as she opened it for him, but then stepped aside. Aren't you going to show me inside this room? Is it some sort of magical room that you don't want to go into? No, I've never been into another man's or woman's room before. Leonardo felt his face flush and hurried in, not wanting to cause any more problems. He walked into a dark room and came to a stop. Some light was coming in from the doorway, but it soon dissipated into a swirl of darkness. If all of the rooms are the same, which, from what I've gathered, intelligence-wise they are, the switch for the light should be on your right." He glanced back to see her standing in the hallway and sort of shuffling off and away from the doorway. With a shrug, he reached to his right as she vanished. He found the switch, which he flicked upward. A second passed before a sudden hum of lights came to life. They were dim, and he wondered if they got any brighter, or that was all they had to give. It did, however, give him some insight into the bedroom, a rather cozy, small one, with a bed, a bureau, a desk, and a nightstand which had a lamp on it. His mind kept telling him it was something similar to a hotel room. If the comic books he read had any truth to them, he was starting to doubt that very much. "Well, I guess I should turn in. It's a bit dusty in here, but otherwise it looks all right." He went over to the bed, pressing on the mattress to see how it would react. It felt fine. Nothing special. Maybe a bit on the bouncy side of things, but I couldn't really tell. He stopped himself from getting out of his clothes, figuring he didn't have any pajamas, and just out of curiosity went to the nearby bureau, throwing open those doors to find quite a few clothes. Now, have these been here for a while, or are these for me? Questions, and no answers. What a puzzling thing I've been dropped into. A quick search through the nicely arranged clothes found a full set of pajamas, which he examined against his own body. They looked about right for a fit, but he was sure that he didn't know exactly what he was looking for or how to do this. So with a shrug, he got out of his clothes and into the pajamas so that he could get some sleep. His mind was in desperate need of shutting down, and the covers were quickly off the bed and then wrapped around him, snuggling him as he shut his eyes. The hoped-for and promised sleep, though, did not come as his mind kept asking questions. Why this? Why the government? Who put him down here? He clamped his eyes hard and curled deeper into the blankets with a hope to blank out all of this. It worked, to an extent. Or if it did, he wasn't totally sure since the lights had at some point turned off. There was now a buzzing noise nearby. He raised his head to find it in a dark room, and found a smartphone with a brightly lit screen vibrating on the nightstand. He couldn't be sure, but that wasn't there before, but he reached out for it anyway, and took the call. "Hello?" "Finally, I've got a hold of you. Congrats on the robbery, well stopped, by the way." The sleepiness that had been present in Leonardo fled quickly as the voice of Catalina cut through it all. How had she found him? Did she know where he was? She could get him out of here, and quick, potentially, and he was desperately wanting to be somewhere or anywhere else. Still, though, best not to completely trust her. She hadn't told him the truth about everything that her gang was doing. Leonardo, you still there?" He realized he was just sitting there, letting his mind wander and not talking. "Catalina, it's you, right? Great. Little time to explain because this is probably going to come all crashing down on me in a second. But get me out of here." A silence followed, leaving him wondering if she had hung up since he hadn't responded right away, or if this had all come crashing down. But he could still hear some breathing, so maybe? Or maybe not? "Okay, but I don't know where you are." "I've been taken potentially by the government and stored underground. If you want to make it up to me for kicking me over the bank desk and lying to me, come find me." "I did no such thing as lying. There was a way around the truth, and I took it. Also, what? What government? Who have you?" "I don't know. I got home and I was knocked out by some people, and then I woke up and was told I was underground by a group of superheroes who can't escape. I need help because clearly I don't belong here, or anywhere near here. I'm not a superhero." "But you did make yourself one." "Well, yes, to live a little, but I'm not really one. To experience life, maybe, and help people. But I don't have superpowers, and I don't think these superhumans are going to let that little issue just go by." "Oh, well, I'll do what I can do. But I'm also not totally sure about the whole you don't have superpower things, though. But I have to go. Bye." The sound of the click in his ear made Leonardo take the phone away. The phone was dark, and no matter which exterior button you tried to press, it would not turn the screen on. With a sigh, he slid the phone back towards the spot on the nightstand, and curled up back under the sheets, hoping that this was just a weird dream, Or maybe hoping that Catalina was going to come save him, or else this was just a very, very weird dream. End of part 6 of The Lost Adventures of a Maybe Hero. Thank you for listening.